kind of leading the way with the group that was doing some of the water quality tests?
Yeah, well, we've got Mr. Paul Conti here with us today from Solitude Lake Management.
Okay.
He's the, I believe you're the district manager, Paul?
Correct. Yeah, I'm overseeing the district at the moment that the Acushnet ponds fall within. So I'll kind of work as like project manager for you. I might not necessarily be on site every time, but I'll be helping coordinate that work and setting the guys up so they know what they're doing when they get out there. But I was out on your site last fall. I did the surveys and the water quality testing. So from our findings there, we put together a proposal. And just in summary for you guys, if you haven't seen it yet, all of your water quality was actually surprisingly good. I was expecting super high phosphorus levels, especially with all those cranberry bogs nearby. But to my surprise, everything was, relatively healthy in that sense. But you guys did have a very high volume of invasive plants in all 4 of your ponds there. Main ones being milfoil and fanwort.
Yeah, that's been something that I know that the town has been wanting to address for quite some time. And we do have some gentlemen here who actually live on the pond, and they've experienced problems with those invasive weeds just getting out of control.
Yeah, they're pretty much just kind of encroaching on all the open water and choking out the water body. So the proposal that I put forth to you guys is just a management plan. We'll go in there and we'll treat those invasive plants. And we'll also treat some of the water lilies. The water lilies are native. But I know you guys Scott, you expressed how like people want to recreate on those lakes. So we won't get rid of all the water lilies, but kind of trim them back to preserve that open water habitat for you guys. So we will do that on the northwest, the southwest, and northeast pond. But the southeast pond was so inundated with weeds, cattails, water lilies, that I think it's kind of past the point of doing herbicide treatments. And I think you guys have to go for something with like dredging or excavation of that pond to get that water level back. So I've been talking to our, our operator or mechanical director. He's the one who does the dredging type work for us. And he's estimating that it'll probably be about $60,000 for us to hydro rake the pond. And essentially a hydro rake is a floating backhoe. We'll put a floating backhoe in there, scoop all the muck, the lilies, cattails out, dump them on shore. We'll let it de-water and then we'll dispose of it. So we're estimating around.
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
I was gonna say, we're estimating around $60,000 to do the physical work. And if we have to dispose of it, we'd estimate that to be about another $60,000. Unless you guys have a farm or some landfill areas that could take the waste for us. It's big cost savings area in that aspect.
Yeah, I believe that's something that that the town DPW can manage. And we do have some farms in the area that I believe could use the dewatered sediment for landscaping or whatever other issues that they would use it for.
Yeah, it's good nutrient rich stuff. So definitely farms could definitely benefit from it.
Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Conti?
How long do you think this process would take?
So first off, we'd have to get a permit. We get a permit from the town of Acushnet. And then once we get the permit from Acushnet, that's an order of conditions. It'll go to the state and we'll get a state permit. Historically, the town permits take a little longer because they have to go to public hearing. So that's probably, I would say, maybe a 2-month process. And then once it's at the state, we do get you a permit from the state in a week or 2. They're pretty good about flipping those around quickly. And then we'll likely treat the weeds in the pond probably June or July, and you'll see results within a week, 2 weeks tops. And then we'll go back later in the year, we'll do the water lilies. We have to wait for all the water lilies to come to the surface before we treat those, and we'll do those in August or early September. And again, probably about 2 weeks. Takes a little longer for the lilies to react, but about 2 weeks, you'll see the lilies die back. And I guess one thing to note, so the water lilies, you will get very little regrowth with the herbicide proposed for those year to year. But the in-pond, the milfoil, and the fanwort, the submersible weeds, I would expect some regrowth from those year to year. That's mainly one, due to the herbicides we propose using, and two, due to the connectivity of the place. There are some systemic herbicides where you don't get regrowth year to year, but for water bodies of your size, you're probably looking well over $100,000 to do those treatments. And then due to the stream that connects the pond, I guess enters on the northwest pond first. I'm sure that stream is just loaded with invasives, and I don't think you guys will really get the long-term results with that investment. You just get continual reinvestigations from that stream.
Yeah, good evening, Paul. Eric Aruda. Question, so it sounds like, obviously, to my understanding, the milfoil is not something we can eliminate. It's just something that you manage. But it doesn't seem, from what I've looked into, there's more of a yearly management that would have to be proposed for that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we would recommend doing that yearly. I think after you do it for several years, you could thin it out to a point. It's always going to regrow, but after I'd say 3+ years, you could probably thin it out to a point where maybe you can take a year off. But I would most likely plan to do it as a yearly thing.
Now, for the initial process of really trying to attack these evasive weeds, is it the same process, or is there some type of mechanical means that you go at it first and then treat it with herbicides?
Yeah, no, for invasive plants like milfoil and fanwort, we recommend staying away from mechanical. They can propagate through segmentation. So if you go in there with a mechanical harvester, you're going to break them up, and they're just going to end up spreading further, increasing your infestation. So we recommend just herbicides for those two plants. But something like the water lilies, if you do want to stay away, you can, water lilies and cattails, you can do those through mechanical means if that's desired.
Now, Paul, since we have so much of a problem with the weeds that are in the pond, after your initial treatment of the pond and the weeds die off, is there a period of time in where we've got to remove some of the sediment or some of the refuse that's going to be left over from the dying weeds?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely do that. The dying weeds, when they break down, they will contribute to sediment. But we typically like to try to get in there sooner, before the plants are totally mature, to limit that sediment accumulation. But there's really, I don't really think there's too much you guys can do to remove them. The ponds are pretty big. If you go in there with machines to try to scoop that stuff up, I don't think your results would be desired. I think it would be more effort than needed. But yeah, they'll drop out on their own in a week or two and just right to the bottom of the pond.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What's the potential with the sediment? Is that something that would dissipate over time through either currents, or is there some type of an enzyme or something that gets introduced in there to be able to kind of eat up the muck to clear out the ponds? Or
yeah, so it's difficult in large ponds. There are some enzymes and bacteria you could add there. From my experience, I mean, the stuff's pricey. It works better in, I think, small ponds doing heavy doses. I think the northwest and the southwest ponds, I think they're big enough and there's enough flow through there where sedimentation is not a real issue at this point. The southeast pond, that's all loaded with the cattails and the lilies, sedimentation is obviously an issue, has been an issue there. And I think the northeast pond will be the next one to see issues from sedimentation. You definitely see, it looks like the shorelines have encroached a little bit, and there's some cattails and such growing around the edge. So that would definitely be a pond. We don't necessarily have to do that now, but I think in the future, that would be a good pond to think about dredging or excavating some of that sediment out of there.
Yeah, I believe in your water quality report, you had mentioned the northeast pond. Would you recommended that we should eventually excavate some of that area because it is starting to accumulate.
Yep. And then again, Eric, you mentioned those bacteria and enzymes, and I a lot of times feel like people add bacteria and enzymes to the pond thinking it's going to eat up all their muck, get rid of their muck, but I really think it's better as like a preventative method rather than a corrective method with those bacteria and enzymes. So maybe after you guys dredge those eastern ponds, could be something to think about just to make your efforts last a little longer. stronger by adding some of those bacteria and enzymes in there.
Paul, prior to you doing any work out there, I know that you're going to be using some type of a herbicide in the water to remove these weeds. Do we have to alert any of the abutters of this activity for any safety issues, or, I'm sure that it's not going to damage or hurt the water quality because we're trying to improve the water quality by getting rid of these weeds. But at the time that you're out there spreading the herbicide, do we need to let abutters or people downstream know that a herbicide is being put into the water?
Basically, the agriculture industries, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So when we apply for the permit, we will send a list to or notice to all the abutters, let them know that we're applying for the permit, what we're applying for, what we're using, et cetera. And then they will have time to comment on that, give their input. But generally speaking, the state only requires us to post public access areas. So the beaches, the boat launches, will put signs up to let people know. And, if it's a fact with the agriculture there, we get in touch with them, put them on our notification list, and let them know of irrigation restrictions. So what we'll use, there's no swimming, no boating, fishing restrictions. Everyone's safe to swim and boat the same day. There will be a 3 to 5 day drinking restriction and a 3 to 5 day irrigation restriction. So in that case, it would be important for us to communicate with the agriculture industry there to make sure that we're going to do this at a time that's not going to negatively affect them.
Right. Give them ample time to either flood a bog or retainment, something to be able to.
Yeah, we have a pond out in Barnstable that's connected to a cranberry bog, and we always just give the farmers there a notice beforehand, and they adjust.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Adjust
Be great to have, since you've dealt with that situation already, obviously to have that information to be, obviously accessible to, like you said, to be able to give them an information sheet or something.
Yeah,
based
we give you MSDS sheets and notification sheets and stuff, all that. And I don't know if you have a town website or anything, you guys we give you information to post there.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll do that. And if you want, we could even go around the neighborhoods, put up posters in the neighborhoods, whatever you guys feel is necessary. We can do that.
Now, concerning the southeast pond, the smallest of the four, you were mentioning that at the time where we're actually going to start excavating that, you can't safely gain access from the road. Is that correct?
Correct. We're going to need an area to work and to make kind of a dewatering corral for when we're pulling stuff out. We pull the sediment out, it's going to be, a lot of water mixed in it, and it'll decrease by about 50 to 70% once that water drains. So we like to build an area where we could allow the water to drain before we haul it away. So from the road's not the best part. Looking at the overhead maps, it looked like, I guess, on the south side of that pond, looked like there were some open areas there. So I'm not sure who owns that land, but I think that would be a good spot to be our staging and dewatering area.
I spoke with, I had the opportunity this past week with my job with the town. I was able to speak to a resident that lives on that pond, on that southeast pond, directly west of that pond, accessible from Lake Street. And he was very positive about, the talks that we've been having, and kind of the decisions to be moving forward to clean it up. And we'll get the information, but he, based upon probably the DPW and access and things like that, and how that's going to be removed, but he was more than agreeable, and it was something that he brought up. I didn't even mention it, to be able to use some of his area to be able to offload some of that, as it's coming out, and probably to drain it out. And again, he was very pleasant to deal with and talk to, and actually look forward to the project.
Yeah, that'd be great. And yeah, it's pretty heavy duty work. We might tear up a little grass and stuff like that, but if he's concerned, always after we'll plant grass seed, resod, erosion control. We'll do anything we have to do that's usually required in the permits as well, just to restore it to how it was before we were there. So
Yeah.
it's great to hear. I'm sure we'll talk more about that as the project progresses.
What do you think, Paul, based upon the structures of the ponds or any, not really knowing kind of, getting too far into detail, do you feel, and I think we've talked about it, once the process begins, it's probably, do you feel that it's important that the waterways are, at one time they were all connected, to be reconnected so that way they can flow in and out from each other? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think that's totally necessary. The flow, and I don't think it's going to affect it too much. I think there's probably, so what, is there some boards between the culverts that you guys could open and close?
Well,
Kinda how-
that southeast pond, I think it's just probably clogged with just sediment. There was no ever any boards for that. The only boards that are on that were set up on the southwest pond down the end that starts out into the Acushnet River. And then they also have a heron run out there too. So it'd be important to know, when the heron are coming. If that's, well, you said it's not an issue for the fish. But there is a gate on that. It was probably about less than 10 years ago, they put in a project and built a new channel for the heron run. And I think it's important. And the gate may have been left open accidentally from time to time. And I think it's probably a good process for us as a town to be able to make sure that, that timeline for the heron to run, that those gates stay closed to keep the water at the correct height so the sunlight doesn't hit the bottom and really expose a lot of this weed growth. But that's really the only gate that's on that pond. Everything else, I think, is just conduits, and they're probably, a lot of them are probably blocked.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know. I think that's sure, part of the permitting process. They know, the state knows about those herring runs, and they may, definitely give us some stuff on that. But I think opening the ponds or closing the ponds, I don't think it's, in your case, super important. If you guys do have bad microscopic algae blooms, which I definitely didn't notice when I was there, I mean, it's always a possibility. If that's your case, I think flow will definitely help you. But if it's just rooted plants, flow or no flow, I don't think it's too much of an issue.
Now, Eric, do you know if there's a connection between the southeast and southwest pond?
Yeah, I was looking at that the other day when I was down there. There is a ductwork. There's a conduit. It looks like it runs right along Lake Street, east to west. And you can see it. You can see it more from Lake Street, looking through at the southwest pond, kind of looking towards the southeast pond. You can see the conduit. I'm not sure if there's an elbow there, because that to me, it looks like it's just a straight shot heading in, connecting those two ponds. But then almost right across from that, on the north side of Lake Street, there is a small guardrail right there, and I believe there's a conduit. Right, it's probably maybe a 10-foot, a 12-foot section of guardrail. I think there's a conduit that also connects that northeast pond to the southwest pond diagonally.
All right.
So it'll be something to take a look at. I don't know if we have that, if there's any documentation on that when through any of the drawings or anything that they did when they initially started, and flooded that pond, and maybe there isn't, maybe something to take a look at, or maybe we could just visually see it and cite it and identify it that's obviously would be the case, hopefully.
Paul, so after, well, typically when is the best time to start this work? You don't want to start it too early before the weeds start to grow. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I guess from the very beginning, it's best to start the permitting, as soon as possible. The earlier we can get a contract, get the permits in there, the earlier we can do the work. But then you got to time it in a certain area when the weeds are starting to grow. You could expose the weeds to the herbicides, but you don't want to wait too long where the weeds are topped out. Just a lot of biomass you're adding to the pond. So typically June, July, depends a little bit on the winter and the spring we get. If it was a cold winter, if it's a cold spring, it may delay some of the growth a little bit. Or if it's a really warm spring, we may see that growth sped up. So we're kind of flexible. We adjust dates depending on surveys and what we're seeing in the area, but June or July, I think, would be the ideal time to do this treatment.
All right.
Paul, I'm not sure if you already mentioned this earlier. And I apologize if you have, but was that $60,000 just to dredge the southeast pond? Or did that
Correct.
include okay, so what would the cost be
Just
for treatment of the other 3 ponds? And what would the yearly cost be to the town to maintain that?
measure it out and kind of give you an estimation just based off of size. Let's find it on the map here. There we go. All right, so that southeast pond is about 3 acres.
That's getting dredged.
Correct. Your northeast pond is about 20 acres. And so if you do the math, I mean, doing the entire north pond, you're probably looking, $400,000, maybe a little less than that. But a lot of times on a larger pond like that, we propose rather than doing it all at once, you do a little bit year after year. You can say we'll chip away at 2 acres this year, we'll chip away at 2 acres next year. So I'm just thinking a little bit in my head. I would say, yeah, probably to do that whole northeast pond, probably close to 200,000. Because again, the middle of the pond is going to be deep there. That's areas where you don't necessarily have to focus. You want to really focus on the sediment-rich areas around the edges, the inlets, the outlets.
Now that's the initial. Would the maintenance be the same?
The maintenance cost is kind of like the herbicide treatments year to year. The price would likely stay the same, but if we notice, the plants are decreasing, we can scale it back for you a little bit. And I guess the other thing to note too, your permitting cost will go down. So your NOI, the state permit, that's a one-time thing. So that would decrease it by $4,000 year after year. So you consider next year would be about 28,000 versus 32,000 to maintain all the ponds.
Now, Paul, in your proposal, because I'm looking through your proposal right now. Task number 2 is a pre-treatment survey. What exactly is that and what does it entail?
Yep, so we'll go out to the pond and we'll basically make, it's more important so on your larger ponds, but we'll make a quick sketch map of exactly where all the plants are. So that when we go out there, we'll make sure we have all the right products. We'll know exactly where to go to. We're not wasting too much time searching around there.
All right, and then I assume that your post-treatment survey would be just a before and after comparison where
Correct.
you see what's out there first and then you treat it and then you see what's pretty much left after treatment.
Correct. And for any reason, post-treatment, if we see there's a lot of plants out there, we'll decide sometimes to go to a follow-up treatment or whatever is necessary. So, but yeah, it's just a good way to document, the effects year to year.
And you were mentioning that you plan on cutting back some of the lily pads that are out there. Is that done using chemical means or is that done manually?
It can be done both. I propose chemical means. It's just quicker and more cost affordable rather than doing mechanical means, but it can be done either way.
So when you put the herbicide out there, you're going to contain it within a certain area so that you don't affect all the lily pads? Is that how that works?
So for the lily pads, we're not injecting it in the water. We're actually spraying it on the leaves of the lily pads. So only the lily pads, the leaves, we'll bring a small boat, go very slowly. So only the leaves that actually get hit by the herbicide will be affected.
Okay. And
whereas
is
the
that
submersed weeds, we're injecting stuff right into the water, right where those weeds are.
so that'll be a different application compared to killing off the milfoil and fanwort and all that?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, we'll do the milfoil in June or July, then we'll come back and do the lilies August or early September.
Okay.
Mr. Conti, do you mind emailing me a copy of that proposal for
Sure, I can do that. Do you
the
mind
record? I
Alright.
don't have it this way. I can put it
Alright,
in with the minutes and everything.
Or I could email it to you, Amanda. I
Oh,
have it.
perfect. Oh, yes, if you
yeah.
don't mind, could you forward it to me? Thank you.
Yeah, I gave David a copy, but I can send you a copy as well.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, I'll do that first thing tomorrow morning.
Awesome, thanks.
Scott, just so I can understand how they break it down, could you also email that to me as well?
Sure, yeah. You're in the
Yes.
email, yeah. So I can send that to whoever, I can send it to whoever wants it.
Maybe even just do a reply all and attach it, just in case, cover all the bases.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good thing to do. And I can also send anybody a copy of the actual water quality study as well, that way, so everybody has it.
Please.
Sure.
Yeah, and once you guys look at the proposal, the report, feel free to come back to me with any other questions. I'd be happy to answer those for you and kind of help you guys through this. So,
Oh, how long does the process take how long would it take based upon, well, I guess like you said, if we broke it down into smaller means to be able to kind of grab little bits of it at a time. Typically, for our setup, I'm not sure if you look at each pond or maybe I'm not looking for each pond, or maybe it's in the quote too that you put in. What's a timeline to be able to get it all? Your application, like the first application, this first year application. How long
will the application take? Trying to think. So the Northwest Pond's the biggest pond. It would probably take close to 2 hours. Southwest Pond, we could probably do that in about an hour. And I would say that Northeast Pond, we could probably do that in under an hour.
Really? Okay.
So we'll probably spend a half day out there between
Okay.
all the ponds. And then similar time for the lily treatment as well. Similar times for both of those.
And just to confirm too, because I mean, I think it's a lot of people that aren't here that are going to be listening in. As far as the non-use for agriculture or irrigation, typically, you said 3 to 5 days. Is that
That's correct? Yeah, depending on the dosage rate we use, it's 3 to 5 days.
Okay.
So we'll be sure to put postings, or we can even notify you guys ahead of time to help distribute that. I guess one other thing though, the lily treatment, there will be no water use restrictions with the lily treatment. It's only the milfoil treatment that we will have these water use restrictions for.
Yeah, September is a busy time on the irrigation.
Right. Yeah, so September won't be an issue then.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Conti? If not, we can let him go. And thank you for spending the time with us and going through that in detail.
Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure. And yeah, feel free. Any other questions as they come up, Scott or whoever else, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk. So.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure I'll be speaking to you pretty soon.
All right, great. Well, thanks all.
All right, well, thank you, Paul,
Thank you.
for joining us.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, so I understand Mr. Wonar has a copy of this proposal, and he's going to be walking it through the whole procurement process.
Yeah, I did send him a copy of the proposal. I think I sent him that, let's see what my email was. I sent that to him around March 12th. So he's had it for about a week.
Okay, I don't know. I know that there was some amount of money that was procured at town meeting for studying the Lake Street development. I'm not sure what kind of limitations was put on that money and how it could be spent. Or if there's any sort of request for proposals that need to take place. But I would think that he's gonna walk that through and follow through with figuring out how that's all gonna work.
Yeah, I think, I think the proposal was probably a little bit less than half of what's been approved by the town, just for the water treatment. The excavation of Tom Davis Pond, the small pond, I think that's gonna end up being done, you know, and unless they can procure some more money, I think that's probably gonna be done maybe next year, just because when I emailed David, initially Paul had given me a very, very rough estimate of about $100,000 to excavate that pond. And then he had said, well, if the DPW trucks it off themselves and we send it to a farm, that should cut the cost in about half. But Paul explained to me, Mr. Conti explained to me that the individuals from their mechanical team, which, you know, they use hydro raking and you know, an excavator and things of that nature, would have to actually go out there, take a look at the pond, get a better idea of what that job is going to entail before he can give us a really good estimate. So with him giving us an estimate of $60,000 to do that, it sounds like that they've already gone out there and looked at this, because that's a lot different than the initial guesstimate that he had given me earlier this week.
Does anybody know what the amount was that was approved at town meeting?
I believe, if I'm correct, it was 75.
75.
That
75.
include safety enhancements, looking into, you know, creating trails, beautification. So it's the $75,000 is not just for the water quality issues. It's intended to be used for water quality as well as all of those other things that I just mentioned with, you know, lighting, more guardrails, you know, a whole slew of different, you know, things that we plan on doing out there.
Okay, so at the current state, if 60,000 of it is addressing the water quality, so there's 15,000 left.
Well, the dollar value that's in the proposal of treating the three larger ponds, the northeast, northwest, and southwest ponds, came out to $32,000. And that's treatment with chemicals, all the permitting involved, all of the studies involved, the pre-treatment study, the post-treatment study. When I give you guys, when I email you the copy of the proposal, it's all laid out, you know, dollar-wise as to what is, you know, being done and how it's broken down. But the grand total was $32,000 for the chemical treatment of the three larger ponds.
Okay.
Yeah, so I missed that. I heard 200,000 in there at one point, or 400,000.
No, it's
That was
32.
that was for the dredging of that of the northeast, right?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the larger pond, well, no, not the larger pond, but the dredging of that pond, because I think with that pond being a little bit bigger, I think there's more work involved as to, and he'd mentioned that some of the areas needed to be dredged in that pond, and I know that pond fairly well. And the only place that I could really think that would need to be dredged is the area in the back.
That cove in the back, yeah, on the east.
Yeah, you know, sort of like where the solar panels are, back in that corner, all the way from that corner back to the west side of that pond. Everything along the roadway, I think,
Yeah.
you know, that water's fairly deep. I don't think there would need to be much dredging there, but I think it's mostly in the back.
Yeah, again, that's probably that rough guesstimate. They haven't looked at that yet or came up, they just probably
Yeah,
just
that
picked
only,
on
that
something.
only came up, yeah, that only came up during their initial study, in which when they went out there to evaluate the ponds and see the problems that they had in the water quality report, it was mentioned that that's something that we should look into in the future to, remove any of the sediment that's in there.
So what he's basically saying is the 3 ponds with the treatment, other than the one we plan on dredging, which would be the southeast pond, it would be $32,000 for those 3 other ponds just for the treatment this year. And would that continue next year, the year after, like a revolving account?
He never specified or mentioned exactly how much it would cost on a maintenance basis
So you just
every
said,
year afterwards.
you just said it
He-
was gonna be 28. It'd be probably a 28 next year because there's $4,000 in permitting that wouldn't be applied to it.
Correct.
Based
correct.
upon if they can scale down over time, once the weeds really start to be managed and, better, then it'd be a less, less amount.
Yeah, yeah. And then Mr. Conti had mentioned that, if we get it to a point where the weeds are starting to thin out, then we can treatment every other year, and kind of spread that out. I'm hoping that it's something that eventually the town themselves can manage, and kind of shy away from, using solitude for the purposes of managing these ponds. If it's because I think that there's a lot of other communities around, and a lot of them out on the Cape that, they manage their own ponds after a certain period of time. And I think they save themselves a lot of money by doing that. And I think that's something that we could eventually do, so we can use solitude to get the ponds to a state where it'll be a little bit easier to manage, and then we can manage it ourselves. So hopefully the town can manage it themselves.
Yeah, that sounds like a reasonable goal.
Yeah, yeah, I think that if we can learn, how to manage these ponds and do it the right way, it'll be that much easier, and the cost savings will probably be really noticeable.
All right, I think that was a primary kind of objective for today, was just to get a better handle and understanding on that report and proposal. I did see the meeting minutes from the last meeting. I'm guessing everybody has had a copy of that as well. Okay, so
Yes, I believe, yeah, I believe I've seen a copy.
okay, so Mr. Warner did tell me today that he spoke to a gentleman, I don't recall the name, of someone who has done much of the signage in town already. I think he's done the sign at Town Hall, maybe the Parting Ways building, and he spoke to him about the type of signage needs at Lake Street. And he's going forward with coming up with some ideas and putting together some sketches on what the signage would include, what it might look like. So he's kind of putting together that whole signage package. So I think at some point in the future, we'll probably have something to look at relative to that. And then at Old Colony, we're going to start working on some preliminary layouts and schematics, probably primarily of the area, kind of the parking area and the area in between the ponds. That would be more of a kind of a gathering recreation area. So we're going to be looking at that, and there's some kayak launches as well. So we're just going to do a schematic plan, and it's going to be a working document. And, we'll come back to a meeting with some schematic drawings and kind of just work on them from there. All right, I do know that the last time the committee met, it was agreeable that the meetings would take place weekly. Does that sound right?
Is it weekly?
Every other, but actually David and I spoke after the last meeting, so it was gonna come up instead of Thursdays to put them back to the Wednesdays. So it would be every other Wednesday. So the next one would be on the 31st, if that works.
Okay, so the 31st at 6 o'clock. Okay. Does anybody else have anything new they want to bring up or discuss? Nope.
No.
Okay. So I don't know if we need a motion to schedule that next meeting or not, or
I'll make a
not
motion if
sure.
we need it. I'll make a motion, Eric Ruda, that we schedule a meeting Wednesday, March 31st, 6 PM.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Okay, then I guess we just need a motion to adjourn. That can be anybody.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right,
I'll
very good.
second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, everyone.
Aye.
Have a good evening.